Torpedo law. Should we comply with the FAA come this September? Oh boy. That's an interesting question. Because if I were to say, no, F the FAA, don't comply, then, that would piss off some people at the FAA and maybe might make them look closer at some of the videos I've posted and wonder if they could find anything to, get me in trouble with. Surely they would never take personal offense to that kind of thing. But if I were to say, yes, you must comply with all laws, then I would not be being honest. So here's my real opinion. It is up to every person to decide what they're going to do in every situation. And sometimes the things that you do have consequences. Well, I mean, in a way, everything you do always has consequences. And I think that most people would agree that just because a government passes a law or rule or regulation doesn't necessarily mean that it is always wrong from a sort of a moral sense. Just because they pass this rule doesn't mean that it is always morally wrong to break the rule and always morally right to comply with the rule. Right? And we could come up with, what if you are, you've been mortally wounded and you have to get to the hospital, so you break the speed limit because you're trying to save a person's life. Right? You could come up with all these weird, stupid, moral situations. But the basic principle of government passes rules, individuals decide whether to comply with those rules or not, and then sometimes if they choose not to comply, there are consequences. That calculus, I don't think you can argue with it. I mean, that's just how things work. And so, come September 2023, the FAA will expect people to have remote ID transponders on any drone heavier than 250 grams or any drone being used for Part 107 operations, regardless of weight. And it will be up to you to decide if you comply with that. And if you choose not to comply, then there could be consequences. The FAA could come fine you and take away your 107 if you have a 107. I think that one of the things that plays into the decision of whether to comply with a rule is whether the rule seems like it is accomplishing something that you agree with and believe in, or whether it seems like the rule is kind of stupid and arbitrary and doesn't accomplish things that you believe in. Right? Like, for example, there are laws against murdering people. Well, the law against murdering people is not the reason that most people don't murder people. As I think it's Ricky Gervais. It might be Penn Teller. It might be Penn Jillette. I always get this quote mixed up and I can't remember who said it. He said, I'm already murdering exactly as many people as I would like to murder. I don't need laws or religious strictures to stop me from murdering people, right? So what I'm getting at there is that the law about not murdering people reflects a value that most people share. And so most people obey that law, not because necessarily, well, there's a gray area where maybe you would murder some people, but you're not doing it because you don't want to go to prison. Obviously, there's always a gray area. But for the most part, most people agree with that principle and obey that rule because they agree with it. So when you look at remote ID, you may say to yourself, is this accomplishing something beneficial that I believe in, and therefore I will comply with it, not necessarily because it's a rule and I just am a rule-obeying person, but because I believe in it. Or you may look at it and go, this doesn't accomplish anything that I think is beneficial, and I'm not going to comply because I just... And then the flip side of it is, what are the consequences of not obeying, right? Because another reason why you obey rules, because you think the rule is like I may think the speed limit on a road is too low, but I don't speed because I don't want to get a ticket. So there are going to be people who choose to comply because they don't want the consequence of getting fined by the FAA. FAA fines start at $1,500 typically per infraction. That's a lot of money. They go up, by the way. That's where they start. A final thing that I would point out is that we have a presumption of innocence in this country, that we're innocent until proven guilty. And there are ways in which that isn't as well sort of protected as it could be. So, don't lean on that too hard. But if you choose not to comply with those rules and you don't want to get caught and fined, then one of the most basic things you can do is not give law enforcement or regulatory agencies the ammunition they need to prove that you did it. Everybody deserves a good defense, even people who break the rules. And so don't make it obvious that you're breaking the rules. You're just making their job easier. I mean, 507RC points out, how many of us comply with all FAA regulations today? I do. I comply with every single one of them. And if you think I don't, then it's up to you to prove it. Bardwell's going to be forced into making a how to comply with the FAA video in a week after this rant. I probably will make that video sometime getting closer to September 2023. I will make a video because I think that for people who don't want to get in trouble or for people who just want to follow the rules, I feel like people who elect to follow the rules get a bad rap in today's society to some degree. Like, if you choose to follow the rules, you must be a stupid sheeple, right? And only people who rebel against all authority are the true American individuals, whatever. Sorry, this is the European stream on Sunday, but I'm sure European watchers also understand this tendency of American culture. And it's like, if you know who knee-jerk rejects all authority? Rebellious teenagers. That's not an actual mature stance. A mature stance is to say, sometimes it makes sense to go with the flow. Sometimes it makes sense to fight for what you believe in. And you have to know the difference between those. So there's people out there with a Part 107 whose whole livelihood is based on that Part 107, and they're gonna just follow the rules. They may not like it, but they cannot afford to risk their entire livelihood by losing their 107. And I'm gonna make a video for the people who choose to comply, telling them what is expected of them and how to comply. And some people are going to watch that video and go, Bardwell's an FAA sellout, because they don't understand the difference between here is what the rule says and here is how you can choose to comply with it. And I personally endorse this rule and think you should comply with it. Rob Schlicht wants to know, what are the chances you get full consequences on the first offense rather than a warning? Rob Schlicht, I have never heard of a case where the FAA came to a drone pilot and said, F you, you're fined, you're done, we don't want to hear it. In every case I'm personally aware of, they come to you and they say, we think that there's an infraction here. Will you talk to us more about it? And usually they are interested in education first. And if you are cool about it, usually on the first infraction at least, they don't bother enforcing the fine. They'll just, in some cases they have said, would you make an updated video to a YouTuber explaining like what you did wrong and what the rule is, because their goal is to educate people. I obviously I don't know if that will be true forever, but that's generally the case. There are usually when you see somebody getting fines, it is a particularly egregious example. Like, for example, Paul Nurkala got fined for the Flight of the Year video where he flew around a train. I'm pretty sure that Paul Nurkala was cool with the FAA when they called him up. Like that he wasn't like, if you can't tell me what to do. And they were like, fine, let's make an example out of this guy. I'm pretty sure that he was cool about it and he still got fined. I think that him flying near a train was critical infrastructure. Maybe, I don't know, but like that really got them, they were like, we got to do something about this. Other cases where people have gotten fined have been cases where they have refused to. The FAA is like, hey, we think you're breaking the rules. Will you talk to us? And they're like, no comment. And the FAA is finally like, okay, I guess we're going to just fine you. How is the FAA going to catch people flying without remote ID? Are they going to drive around? No. The FAA has a program they're working on, LEAP, the Law Enforcement Action Program. And the idea for LEAP is that the FAA will train local law enforcement on what the rules are, how to recognize when people are breaking them, and how to enforce them. The local law enforcement can't enforce a federal regulation, but what will happen is law enforcement will get a call. There's a boy with a drone, and he's threatening my little dog. Oh, 911, come help me. The police will show up, and they will say, excuse me, sir, can you land your drone? We got a report that you're flying in this area. We just want to know, hold on, checks notes from the FAA. Do you have a trust test result? Do you have a remote ID transponder? You don't. Oh, well, I'm going to need to get your name and information. And then they pass that back to the FAA. On such and such a day, at such and such a time, so-and-so was observed to be flying a drone at such and such a location without remote ID. And then the FAA will decide what to do with it. That's how they'll catch you.